Now, Blatter could not have succeeded had he operated against the grain of FIFA's culture. This is FIFA's culture, and a large part of FIFA's culture is in compliance and doing business with Western nations, Western sponsors, and Western broadcasters. This is not a can of worms. This is a basket of weasels who have been operating for decades. When I first looked at this, it was back at the U.S. World Cup in '94. There's nothing here that's new. Everyone knew about it, and whenever we wrote stories about it, the response from FIFA, the French Department of Justice, the German Department of Justice was, oh, the fans don't care. They're here to see the games. That's the story of FIFA in a nutshell.
Even less scrutiny. That's an interesting point. Even less scrutiny, you might say, than other transnational institutions like the UN.
Oh, that's true. I mean, but it's two separate things. One is kind of the general international institutional landscape and what this has to do. And
because
maybe
we think of FIFA almost as if it's a UN-like organization.
Excuse me, may I just interject something here? Both the IOC and FIFA, back in the 90s, hired public relations firms for hundreds of thousands of dollars to lobby the UN into granting them observer status at the UN sitting next to the Palestinians. These people operated.
They failed, though.
They failed, and they were very angry about that failure.
Sunny Kapoor.
Well, I was going to refer to the IOC. So, you know, the FIFA scandal is part of a pattern of something we've seen before across, in particular, Swiss-based international organizations, but also in general within the sporting community. Cricket has had its share. For example, we've seen scandals in cycling. We've seen scandals in boxing. And wherever there are a small group of individuals in an opaque capacity able to control the flow of large sums of money and dispense favors, we are going to come back to exactly that same consequence. And this has to be tackled systemically or nothing will change. Blatter leaving does very little for that.
And I guess question one, and it brings us back to what Brian was saying about the Swiss wanting to get in the act, is when you say they're tackling it, who tackles it?
Well, very interestingly, I mean, there are precedents. So if you look at UBS and Credit Suisse and other Swiss banks like Julius Baer, in all cases, action over the past 5-6 years has been taken by US authorities into getting the Swiss to then actually try and do something domestically. The Swiss have historically been a tax haven, have had a culture, a corporate culture, which allows things to go on that wouldn't be allowed in many of the other countries which have higher scrutiny. Every country's got double standards. I mean, the US has got its own tax havens. But there has been a systemic problem with Switzerland. I mean, last year, Credit Suisse was hit with the single largest fine that has ever been levied on a bank, about $10 billion US. And I think the Swiss, not just for FIFA alone and historically the IOC, but for everything else that has happened and for how much they have been in the news, in bad press, need to get their act together. And it might actually, hopefully, be a response to this pressure.